Siemens and Nvidia pair up to make some more digital twins. Today on Metaversity, your first stop for everything on the frontier of metaverse and everything blockchain. I'm Chris with Kristen, and we'll explore this new world together. So we've got a few cool things to talk about today. The first one, just to kind of kick off, is Sebastian Bourget, the founder of Sandbox. He has been doing some interviews.
Is that who's pictured up here on our little whiteboard?
Yep, that's him up there, and then I've got kind of a little image of.
Let me see. I'm going to change my seat really quick here and
see if we can get a little closer.
Workroom. There we go. Now, so there. You can see him a little bit better now.
You can see him a little better, and the image of the Sandbox.
Yeah.
So he's co-founder of the Sandbox, and maybe to kind of
Is there a reason why it looks like? Okay, it's fine. I was just like, it looks a lot like Minecraft. It's all Minecraft.
Well, it's kind of that same style, kind of blocky characters and that kind of stuff. And that actually brings up a good point. If you're not familiar with the Sandbox, Sandbox started out as mobile app.
To change my seat back
and jumping from seat to seat.
Well, it's like it's great to like get close. There we go. It's great to get close to the whiteboard, but like
then you're right up on it.
Yeah, and the controls are like they're close to good, but they're not quite like perfect yet. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Well, Metaverse is new.
Yeah,
we're got some obstacles to figure out along the way.
Just one of those things. Like we're trying to just use the room a little bit more in our visuals. Right.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. We're hoping to have a couple guests soon, and they'll probably be on the opposite end of the table on
it'll
the
be
screen
in this little screen that we see floating
over here and joining us, and that'll be real exciting.
Yeah.
But back to the Sandbox. For anybody who's not as familiar with the Sandbox, it started out as kind of like a mobile game, or a game that was available on mobile devices and PC, but it's really kind of become a little bit more cutting edge in the sense that you can buy things like digital assets and digital land and that sort of stuff on the metaverse or within the Sandbox, depending on how you want to use the terminology. And they've actually had some relative success, but maybe not as much as they wanted. Sebastian has basically said that he expected at this point to have millions of users, and they're in the hundreds of thousands, but they've made hundreds of millions of dollars, so that's not too shabby either.
Sure.
In some recent interviews, he's kind of talked about how the thing that's excited him most is a lot of large companies have just kind of rushed in, and maybe there's not a clear path to monetization for them yet. And obviously that's, if you're somebody like Gucci who is, in the Sandbox now, obviously at some point they want to be making money some way, whether it's some sort of advertising that people are seeing them in the Sandbox and then buying their product, or maybe they're selling something. But he said it's exciting that these companies are diving in, even though there's not necessarily that clear path to monetization yet.
Sure. I mean, I assume that at some point the idea of, Sandbox anyway for them and any of these companies that offer this kind of experience, is that they will have some kind of maybe marketplace or something within the app to handle that.
Right. And I think to his recollection and to my recollection too, compared to I think this would be, on the verge of Web3. It's definitely something brand new for companies that may be wanting to, advertise or become a part of. But, in the original web, I think a lot of these companies were a lot more hesitant to dive in. And they're probably looking back at, man, how much revenue did we lose because we didn't want to dive into, Web 1 or Web 2 and sell our stuff or advertise or that kind of thing. So
how many of them missed out on their domains, like Simple Thing?
Yeah,
right?
Just Simple Thing, or how much business could they have gotten from advertising? And it's kind of that first in thing too. When you're first in, you kind of get your pick of where you want to be and where you want to advertise, and maybe even have an idea of how you want to steer it as well.
Yeah, I think part of it too is like if you're trying to figure out like how to advertise, like what's like it's completely different in this new world, or it ought to be anyway. I mean, we had that discussion,
right,
like, I don't know, podcast or two ago. And it was like, is it going to be little banners that say 20% off of this rack? Or is it going to be something better than that? Something more interactive than that? Something very different than anything they've been doing in a Web 1 or Web 2 world, right? And it's going to be different. It has to be different. People are immune to billboards and that kind of crap now.
Right.
Like, because it's just been plastered everywhere. And so you almost don't see it. Like, you're driving down the road now in the real world. Do you even notice the billboards? I notice them only if, my phone's dead.
Right.
You know what I mean?
If your phone's dead, or sometimes there's something kind of outrageous on them, but I still feel like even if you read it, it kind of goes by and you don't think twice.
I mean, and they have, like, I don't know. It's just one of those things that you've gotten kind of like desensitized to. And so they don't land the same way that they once did. And that's when you saw like native ads start showing up inside your feed.
Right.
So, it looked like regular content, and therefore you would actually see it. And I think those are still very effective, especially compared to the alternatives. So,
right.
But where we're headed next, I think, these folks getting in on Sandbox or whatever, or even, if they're jumping into other alternatives for VR or whatever, I think it's getting them an opportunity to start making new content. And then when we switch over from, this VR primary to an AR being the primary, I think at that point, then they're like, oh, okay, well, I've already made this VR content, and all I need to do is just figure out how I want it to play in this AR situation where it's in the real world. And I think you'll see, that's when things start to really get interesting for advertising.
Well, and going back to advertising, we all hate clickbait.
Yes.
But if you kind of take the hatred of clickbait out of it, the genius behind it is amazing. I mean, you see something that looks kind of legit. You see an article that you think is kind of interesting. And, probably a lot of our listeners that are a little bit more tech savvy probably click on it a little less, but we've all fallen prey to it. You're like, oh, check this thing out. And you like click it, and then you're like, oh man, like,
yeah,
what did I just click?
Well, because usually it's just an ad.
Right.
Like, there's no actual like meat or content to the thing you just clicked on.
But there'll be some version of that. And I think you're seeing them kind of find their way a little bit. We've talked about how some of the fast food restaurants, I think it was Chipotle, and I think one of the pizza places, I can't remember which one it was, but they have places like in Sandbox and Decentraland and stuff like that where you can go in and, you can actually make your burrito. And as funny as it sounds, silly little games like that, they're sitting there looking at the Chipotle brand the entire time.
Right. Well,
while people are playing that little game.
But it depends on who your audience is. Like, I think there's a good chance that, a slightly older audience doesn't have an interest in making a burrito.
No, I'd bypass
However, I do know that like our teenage kids love to play like the work simulator in Oculus and, pretend to do work, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I know.
So they would be interested, I think, in like, making a burrito or making their own pizza or something. Like, just because it's
I know.
Just what
I hope that
do.
shows future work ethic, that they're willing to spend hours on a video game playing, and what it would be like to work in a fast food restaurant or a convenience store.
Yeah, it's weird, but
that's a little off topic. But yeah, and he's kind of talked about the excitement there. He also thinks that, even though he's the co-founder of Sandbox, he still thinks that, which I agree with and disagree with, but the Metaversity, the Metaverse won't be 100% adopted for probably at least another 10 years. And I agree with that. Maybe, we're still early in, and Web3 and blockchain technology isn't quite, it's not fully accepted yet, and people don't understand it. So, we have a ways to go before we kind of get to that point. So it kind of makes sense. So that was kind of some stuff from Sebastian, he's been talking about the excitement of, some of these big companies that are starting to jump in on the Sandbox. I want to maybe talk a little bit about Siemens and Nvidia. This is real exciting technology. So they're partnering together. And so Siemens does a lot of manufacturing. They do a lot of things. They're one of those conglomerate companies that makes, paint and glue, and they manufacture stuff and do all kinds of crazy stuff. And then, of course, Nvidia, if you do anything with computers, you know who Nvidia is. They make video cards and GPUs and that kind of stuff. So why would these two companies come together? The partnership is, I read a couple of the press releases, and it really kind of boils down to something we talked about a lot, which is digital twins. Siemens sees partnering up with Nvidia to start working on digital twin technologies to make their manufacturing plants more efficient. So they can potentially create that digital twin of the factory, and then as they make changes and things like that, they can do it on the twin before they do it on the physical plant and see how things go, versus kind of the old way of doing it was they would decide that, we need to tweak the settings on these manufacturing tools, or we need to add, this manufacturing automation, and it'll make things better, just to find out that it's not, or it wasn't what they expected. But now they can do it in more of that digital twin universe, and they're wanting to leverage the power of the tools that NVIDIA provides to be able to do that.
Interesting. Yeah, I like the idea of that. I think, the more companies start kind of employing this digital twin, the more realistic it is to think that the entire world could be a digital twin. Do you know what I mean? Like the more adoption, even by just companies, the more adoption that there is, the more likely it is that we'll have a digital twin of the whole world and all the inside and outside spaces, right?
Right. Well, and Siemens has this thing called Siemens Accelerator, which is kind of their digital platform that they've named it, that essentially does that. And, kind of their quote that I saw on a couple of their press releases was, it provides a method for people to solve real world problems virtually and quickly at less expense than experimenting with real fixes, real world fixes. So I think what they're saying by that is, from that quote is, when you kind of just jump in and do it in the physical world, you hope it's right and you hope it all works out. And versus in the digital world, you can try it out, see how it goes, see what cost savings you have, any efficiency savings or benefits that you have. And then if it doesn't work out, you just reverse course and try again. You don't have the outlay of money and the physical labor and the equipment that was maybe purchased or modified to try that all out.
I think, this concept of kind of modeling things has existed for probably a long time. Mm-hmm. So what is the difference then between that kind of modeling, which has existed for a long time, and employing the hot term now of digital twin?
Well, I think with the difference between the modeling is you had a physical model, but it was exactly that,
Well, you could
you had a digital model or a physical model, but they were very similar as far as what.
But I mean, they had data, right? And they plugged that data into this simulation of whatever and ran that. Right. So well, what's the difference?
I think it's the introduction of AI into that. I think they had the data before and they had the models, but I think as the technology has gotten better, and they've been able to utilize technology with AI, they can actually see legitimate results from it rather than just kind of test running stuff. I think before it was still kind of in this ambiguous world, would it work kind of thing, but they couldn't really get the level of data that they can now that would prove whether it's actually efficient or cost savings.
Yeah.
It was more of would it work or not work.
Well, that's interesting. It's, like I said, I think it's great to see more people trying to do this, and they lend some legitimacy to it,
Well, and I think the other part too is when you think of it from the metaverse standpoint, digital models have been around for a while. You could build something in SolidWorks and then you could send somebody the SolidWorks file and they could pull it up in their computer. I think where they're actually going is in a virtual world like this, they can actually, see it. They can go visit it. And I think the 3D models don't really change in that, except for now they can be in a virtual space as well that allows them to experience what that new layout's going to be, or the changes that they have as well.
Another thing too, I'd be curious about, you probably don't know this, but a lot of companies have decided to start using like HoloLens.
Right.
And we understand, but I don't know that our listeners, I don't know if we've talked about it enough, but
right.
So our listeners may not know this, but in order for HoloLens to really kind of do everything it really could be doing,
right,
to kind of augment your real life with the digital, components, it really needs that, kind of 3D digital twin of your entire workplace.
Right.
And so if I wanted to, I don't know, run simulations or make changes, or I need a guide to tell me how to change the actual machine that's sitting in front of me, not in a VR, but I mean in an augmented reality.
Right.
So I'm looking at a physical machine and I'm having this thing like show me exactly on the machine, because it has a map of the machine. It knows exactly to the millimeter, 10th of a millimeter, exactly where things are because it's been mapped. And so as I'm like walking through this, fixing a physical machine in front of me, I have these like little pointers telling me, hey, it's right here. You have to take this and twist it, 3/4 of an inch this way or whatever. Right.
Right.
And so I'd be curious if Siemens is employing HoloLenses along with this idea of, having a digital twin, if they are then using that to really kind of step up their manufacturing game.
Well, to add to what you just said there, I'm sure they are. It wasn't mentioned in the stuff I read, but I mean, it seems like that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And what a great training tool.
Absolutely.
Some of these manufacturing plants, from experience that I have outside of Metaversity, I know some of these manufacturing places are super dangerous. And especially if you don't know what you're doing. So these digital twins with VR, can really help out in a training situation where you can teach people how to use the equipment or interact with these devices before you kind of throw them in the frying pan, if you will, where it's dangerous. And if they mess up, it could mean losing a finger or worse.
Yeah. And part of the idea of having the digital twin, right, is a real-time version of that in digital form. And, you can get that real-time digital twin just by having, cameras, which, I'm sure all of these manufacturing plants have cameras everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And those tie in. And so if something is like falling over here, I can be made aware, some little pop-up or something like pops up in my screen and tells me, hey, look out, or whatever, heads up. And then that it's there and you can get it. Maybe it makes it a safer work environment.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. And then I think to wrap up, we've got a beautiful picture. You can probably see a little better than I can, of Fort Worth, Texas. And Fort Worth, there was actually a art project that was done. And I love hearing about these because when AR glasses come out, these experiences are going to be like super amazing. But the visionary behind it was somebody named Colbrero. So I hope I said your name right. I apologize if I didn't. And basically back when the pandemic started, there's a couple small neighborhoods that felt very kind of small town in Fort Worth where there was lots of shops and restaurants and things like that. And with the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of those places lost, a ton of business. Things were either shut down or people were scared to go to these, types of businesses, and for rightful reasons. But it was very hard on these types of places. And so he was looking for a way to kind of bring people back to those areas and understand those areas more and have it be more of an outdoor experience. So Fort Worth already has quite a bit of art around its city. And so he started this AR project where, of course, you have to use your phone for now, but there's a starting point and you use your phone and it'll actually walk you through these little areas. They're about a 30-minute walk for each one, and there's a few different experiences. And through your phone, you can see the existing artworks will maybe come to life. They maybe morph a little bit, change a little bit. But then there's also on those same walks additional art pieces that have been added to sides of walls and storefronts and things like that, which when we've talked about what AR is going to be in the future with glasses and wearables, that's basically it, only without the wearable.
Right.
You've got your phone, but it's enhancing that. But, he's also incorporated a little bit of history about the buildings, where the building came from and the architecture, because, Texas is kind of this melting pot. I don't think a lot of people realize you've got a lot of, European settlers that headed west that are there. You've got a lot of Mexican natives that settled in that area. So you've got this huge mishmash of people. And because of that, you have all these different architectures. You've got European and Spanish and Mexican and all this other stuff that's all in there. And so they talk about the history of the buildings, and there's the additional artwork. And then they even talk about what these various shops have to offer. So back when people were afraid to enter the stores, they could even stop by the shops and understand what it is that they offered without stepping inside.
That's interesting.
So it was a cool use of the technology, but it's actually really forward thinking, because we've talked about, well, that's what we want to see in the future, just with a wearable instead of a phone.
Right. I mean, it kind of sucks that you have to experience it with this little, handheld phone portal to your digital world. But, it's kind of interesting. Like I've played with a lot of this tech where you can take like let's say a business card. Okay. You can start with something easy. That's a little business card, and you upload a copy of that business card, what it looks like. And then you can create and tie to that business card and a digital thing. Right. And so long as you know what it is, like, it can recognize the business card and it'll play your little thing, which I thought it was pretty cool. So like I did like a little robot, and he ran across the business card and waved at you. And then he kind of went and like went like a little tornado back into the business card. Right. And it was just a simple little thing. But why I bring that up is in terms of art, if you have already, art that everyone can see, you've got a mural painted on the side of a building, and that's gorgeous. Right. But the idea of, okay, if I just took a picture of this and then I upload it into this other program, and then I can build on that with more art. Right. And it will pop out and you can walk around it, because it's like static. It's tied to what it's seeing of that digital. Right. It's seeing the image from your phone because it's using the camera. And it's like, okay, and here's what I'm going to show digitally. And it's going to come out, however far that I've set when I've made this digital thing. And, there may be layers to it, and it may move and twirl and, animate. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's really a neat way to augment your art, to really kind of take it to the next level. So that's really fun, because it's great to see artwork on buildings. I mean, we see that here local to us as well. And it really brightens up buildings, and it just makes it really a nice landscape. Right. But then to augment it with that digital stuff is really kind of neat. So you're doing a few things. You're kind of taking that Pokemon Go mentality, right? And you're saying, okay, here's a tour. Here's some information at each little stop, but they're getting you out and walking around and like getting some exercise while you go and check out the art around your town and the history. And I just like, it's such a good mishmash of a couple of different concepts, like get out and experience your town, get it some exercise, see the art, learn some about your town, the town's heritage, its culture. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I think so. I look forward to hopefully more experiences like that. And I haven't had a chance to play with it, but I guess there's experiences like this in other places too that maybe people don't realize. The app that this experience, or you can see this experience through, is something called Neighborhood Leap. And, I plan on downloading it and seeing if there's some way to see where there's some of these experiences located and kind of check them out. And I'll have a, link to some of this stuff when we make the post, so you'll be able to check it out as well.
Maybe we could do one of those, and then, we can share what it was like on our social media accounts.
Yeah, absolutely. See what the experiences are. I know there was a video, and I couldn't figure out a way to do it justice. But there was a kind of like a statue, and it was a ball, but it was kind of abstract at the same time as round. But I should have just put a picture of it up. But it was a video, and the colors changed, and it kind of looked like it moved and swirled around. And the closest thing that I could think of that it reminded me of is if you've ever been to Disney and you see the projections they put on, like the Tree of Life or the castle, or some of those places where, after dark and they do those projections and it seems like it comes to life, looked very similar to that, only you were experiencing it through your phone in an AR experience instead of it being a projection.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. Yeah, not for nothing, but those projections have to have a digital twin as well. They have to, I've seen some people like make a paper mache version of, well, not paper mache, I guess. I don't know. They make a version of the castle, for example, at Walt Disney World, and then they map that out, and they have a projector, and it feels like very simple technology, really, in the end. And then they project a light show on that in their own home.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of different videos of that, but it's kind of the same idea. Like you have to have a
You have to have
a digital. Well, you have to. I'm not going to say it's a digital twin because it's not. But you do have to have a model of that thing,
right?
And then in order to bring it to life like that, it's pretty cool to see that people do that stuff at home. And I would love to see this. We'll have to check out that app and then
see if there's
post our
anything close
results.
by.
Yeah, post our results on social media somewhere. I don't know.
So. All right. So with that, I think that wraps it up this week.
Sure. Make sure you subscribe to us.
Yep. Leave any comments. Check out our other videos, and we'll see you on the next one.